understand what you're saying, but you didn't put it back.
Exactly. I might be talking about like portraiture in the morning, and then like some weird illusion. Yeah. That was made by a photographer. It's pretty good. That's not great, but after you put it on, you don't want to try.
No, I love it. Did you end up going to business? Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Never been. No, but I would love to visit.
I might stir up the crayon.
We're going to change your F stop to 5 points. You guys do that? No, let's do that. Width. Your eyes.
Are we recording?
Great. Let's just try this.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad we've got some food. We're getting lunch. We're getting ready for the fair. So here at the library, it's already fun to see all of the people coming in and the activities that are happening at the various tables. So this will be a nice moment to just ground us in some of the tools and resources that can be at the fingertips of educators and how to use this in our classrooms and communities here. And then we'll be able to learn more and roam and listen and learn. And then we're going to come back here at about 2:30 for just a final wrap up and some conversation about what we need to improve and how these kinds of activities have helped us think differently. So I'm Lisa Guernsey, and I direct the Teaching, Learning, and Tech program at New America, which is an organization we're based in DC. We have offices in Minneapolis and representatives in New York and many other places. And one of our roles is to, in a time of rapid technological change and societal change, to really lift up new ideas and innovations that can help people to be better to each other at the very base of it all, but also to better understand our world and to create more equity and opportunity for people in our communities. So that's a big, broad mission statement. This particular project is one that is a piece of that plan that New America has, that the mission. Here in Pittsburgh, over the past several months and continuing through the next several months, we are running an event series that, as you've seen in some of our materials, and I think many of you have also seen our postcards and others, is called Overcoming Obstacles to Connection, a Humanities plus Tech Approach. And the idea of this is honestly to help recognize what richness there is in storytelling, in history, in art, in performance that helps us stay connected as individuals in our communities, as members of families, as students in classrooms, but also to use the new tools at our fingertips now to preserve that sense of connection and to even elevate it and make it richer than it already is. So we started with a series on our event in July that was focused on educators and raising their voices to help understand what's possible for educators working with new tools, but also what concerns they may have about a variety of things, everything from artificial intelligence to the way different social media is used. This particular event is focused on our roots and understanding history better and using new tools such as data visualizations and maps of all kinds to have that, foster that better understanding of where we've come from or where different groups of people have come from and how they've come together. And we'll have a third event in early December that will look at arts and manufacturing. and we'll bring together some of those themes of artisanry and craft, but in a technological world, and how makerspaces and other types of environments for learning are helping to really elevate people's connection to each other, but by using new technologies. So it's been a lot of fun for us to be doing this project. We're just very grateful to partners, so I just really quickly wanted to call out Carnegie Library, particularly for this event, Dan Hensley and Amy Welsh, who have been back and forth and are doing a lot for the fair now, have been working diligently on this project with us. We're very thankful to Heinz History Center, Amanda, as well as Mary Ruth, for putting together the workshop for educators, and for Ryan Hoffman at Create Lab and other partners at Create Lab who's been helping us think about this as well, and Remake Learning. And we're going to hear from Cindy Chan, the director of Remake Learning, in just a moment, as an advisory partner on this and helping us make these connections across different organizations that are here in Pittsburgh locally. So a couple of quick notes, and then I'm going to introduce our speakers, plural, for this lunch conversation. I do want you to know that there are, on the table there by the door, there are more yellow stickies and other kinds of materials to jot down notes and ideas, things that just occurred to you as you were listening to the educator workshop this morning. So we can just get those ideas down while they're fresh in your mind. We'll be bringing some of that back together again when we talk at 2:30. But we're also using documentation on that. As you can see, we have teens and students from the Pittsburgh area around us as videographers. And that's because Steeltown Entertainment is one of our fantastic partners on this project. We're very grateful to them. This is an opportunity both for Steeltown and its crew to be engaged in these conversations, but it's also just a really important moment for us to be able to have a moment to capture some of what we're talking about so that it can be used in the future. So, and I know there may be some people who do not want to be on camera, and so we're aware of that, and our crew also is recognizing that too. So, the materials that are coming out of these events, just wanted you to know where they're going to land, and you all very much have, please feel free to give us feedback and comments about how they will be used. We will be producing at the end of all of this materials that will be online, but also available through a larger culminating event that we're going to do as a way to sort of stitch together some of the new ideas that have been generated, some of the bigger questions that community members have, and a lot of that's coming from our interviews that are on camera, as well as some of the comments that come from discussions during the various events that we had. So that's why we've got some cameras here, we've been taking some photos, and we thank you all for your understanding of that, but also your participation in it, because it's what really makes this a lot of fun. So my last note is that in addition to what we just described, on November 12th here in Pittsburgh, participant media will be doing a screening with New America is helping to kind of facilitate this, of its new documentary. And this documentary you might have heard of, it's American Factory. It's gotten a lot of buzz. The Obamas in their organization are behind it as well. And so you'll have an opportunity, if you live here in Pittsburgh, to go to a dinner and a screening and discussion of that new documentary. And information about that will be coming to all of you as well soon. So I think that's it. I'm going to turn it over now to Andy Mink. So Andy is the VP for Education Programs at the National Humanities Center. And the National Humanities Center is based in, is it Chapel Hill? Durham? Yeah, North Carolina. But it is an organization that spans the United States in terms of the way it connects scholars and its scholarship in the humanities. Andy's background for years, and he started as a public school teacher, has been how to use digital innovations to really lift up new scholarship, but also help people understand it and grasp it and make some sense of it. So I'm really thrilled to have Andy here with us. The National Humanities Center is a partner on this broader project with us, and we'll be hearing more about that in our next events as well. And so I'm going to turn it over to Andy now. Thanks for being with us.
Of course, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, actually, I should say. Thanks for having me. I want to thank Lisa and New America for partnering with us and inviting us to be a part of this. But actually, I'm going to pause for just a moment because I'm having a moment. The very first class of kids I stood in front of, 27 kids, 1992, and it was in a building, in a room where there were no windows, and the school is too small. The school is too small for the kids, so we had to eat lunch in our classrooms. And right now, I'm having this olfactory moment of smelling your chips and your lunch. It feels just like teaching those kids and having food everywhere and hearing the crunch. And it's funny, those kinds of experiences inform everything, certainly that I have done ever since. 27 kids that first period, 152, I think, that full day. And ultimately, I think the work and the conversation I like to have over lunch is that connection between research and scholarly work in academics and technology with a much more practical approach in the classroom. So what I'm going to try to do for just a handful of minutes is try to maybe articulate that bridge and think about ways in which we can embrace technology or embrace computers or embrace these kinds of digital landscapes that we're all living in, but doing it in a way that matters for the kids we work with, the students we work with, really at any age. At any point, please feel free to go and visit our website, nationalhumanities.org. National Humanities Center, as Lisa said, is located in Durham, North Carolina. It was constructed in 1978, and it continues to be the only nonprofit, fully independent research center in the humanities in the world. So every single year we get a cohort of university professors. They apply from all over the country, and if they're selected, they move to North Carolina and they come to that building every single day, and they come to their own private study and they do the work. That work is research in a book project. That work is collaboration with colleagues in interdisciplinary ways. That work is more increasingly digital projects. And these are folks who cover the full span of the humanities, from history and literary scholarship to the classics, to art, to music, whatever that may be. And so in many ways, the center is designed to advance our understanding of the world. And I really want to emphasize that point as we talk today, because the humanities is often sort of put at odds with the STEM disciplines, and we often have to articulate the value of the humanities. And from my perspective, it's no less, and in fact maybe more important than a lot of the other hard skills that we teach and we learn and we practice in our world. Technology and math and science, these things are super important about how to do things and maybe even what to do, but the humanities is why we do it. Like this is the point right now, and I'm actually increasingly optimistic in this complicated world we live in that the humanities will continue to be a really important way to understand ourselves, the way we position with other people and our community and the responsibilities we have there. So I think the work that we do, 42 years later, nearly 1,500 alumni, every major award won in all the major disciplines, is really important to helping us understand that world. Our education department then, what I run, is designed to create bridges between that scholarly world and the classroom. And I mean classroom very broadly. We work certainly with K-12 education all across the country. We also work with community colleges and post-secondary educators, how to infuse content into the work that you do. So when I think of what we do in education, it really is intended to be very collegial, very side by side. We put scholars and teachers at all levels together to really try to understand how content, how scholarship can affect teaching practice. Some of you will remember this. It really is about more you know, right? I mean, no matter how confident you are as a teacher, if you want to navigate the complexities of standing in front of all these students of any age, the more you know, the more able you are to do those things and make those kinds of choices and allow things to be a little bit more open-ended. From that process and all the initiatives that you can find on our website, we develop content, and that content is designed to be open and free, and it's designed to be applicable, again, to really any classroom that handles the humanities in a both curriculum and extracurricular way. Then I think ultimately what this is intended to do is build advocacy for the humanities. These aren't extra things you do when everything else is done. Aesthetics, beauty, civil discourse, understanding our identity, understanding culture, recognizing marginalized voices. These are really important facets of our democracy. It's not extra stuff, but rather really critical work that we do. And that advocacy, I think, is just constantly reaffirming and reminding all of us why these subjects and these disciplines matter. So I'm actually not going to talk to you much at all about technology in the next handful of minutes. I'm not going to really talk about the gadgets and the programs and the software much, although those are super important expressions of what we try to do in the humanities. What I'm going to talk to you about is geospatial thinking. Because from my perspective, it's more about how we think geospatially than what the tools may do for us, or what a map, if you open in a book, or roll down off that ceiling, that big roll that we used to have to pull the maps down. Maps are not two-dimensional objects. They're not facsimiles of the real world, right? They're not Polaroids that we take of the world and we show and go, this is exactly what it is or where things are. Maps, it seems to me, tell stories. And that's what the humanities do, is give us a vocabulary for telling stories. So take a look at that map. What do you guys think that's a map of? Land? Okay. What's that a map of? What's it displaying? What's the symbology, do you think? What kind of material is it on? It's a what? It is. That's exactly right. It's a deer skin. So what do you think these circles and these lines and these sort of abstractions, what do you think they represent? Definitely communities. So you see native names in most of the circles. There's a big square down here that says Virginia. And then there's a series of much more symmetrical lines here. You likely can't read this because it's facing me, that says Charleston. What do you think this is a map of? Oftentimes when we give maps to younger students, they immediately think that maps show you how to get to places. Is this a map of destination? Like how to get somewhere? I don't think so either. I think the scale is completely off. Virginia and Charleston are not nearly that far apart. So what do you think it's showing?
Is it native communities in reference to one another where they were living?
Yes, and not, but not necessarily location of where they're living.
Okay.
So I don't know that the Cherokees are necessarily living next to this one, right? But you're right, it is a native community. But they're all sort of equal sizes, not all. So there's some kind of scale to the groupings that they've done. But what do you think the connections are between those circles of lines? Alliances for sure. Around what in particular do you think? Trade. It's a trade map. So this is a map that tells the English how they can trade with different natives. And you basically have to follow the lines that connect. You can't get to this tribe unless you go through this one. You can't talk to and negotiate with one of these unless you go down the path. So it's actually a map of trade relationships and the ways in which these communities interact with each other, the kinds of symbology, I'm sure, also indicates some kind of sacred space or some kind of hunting space or some kind of directions on how you can approach if you were to engage with any of these tribes at any given point. So in 1725, it was really important to know who you could trade with, who you could trust, who you could go through, where that alliances might be. So this map has nothing to do with where things are. It has nothing to do with the scale and the distance between things. It's all about the relationship between people. And you're right, it was, I think somebody said it's a deer skin, so it rolled up. That's where you see the creases. You kind of draped on the back of your horse maybe, or carried into your arm. And when you get somewhere, you kind of, boom, unfurl that thing and try to figure out who you can speak to. This is the earliest social network right there. This is a map from the similar collection from the National Archives in the UK. This is a new map of Carolina, North Carolina in this case, along the Cooper River and Ashley River, which is just above Wilmington. What's interesting about this map to me is that in this case, there is a location, right? There is some sense of physical and geographical representation. But what's really important about this map are the names of the families who own the land. So if your name was put there, you're at the top of the bracket. But if someone chose to leave your name off, or if someone chose to erase it the next time they made it, then you're not part of that system anymore. And in fact, many of the streets and the towns in this area still have these family names. In other words, it's a map that legitimizes, or a map that documents the importance of land ownership and families and the relationships between them. Sure, it shows you where things are. This is about who people are. This is about who the cool families are, who the important and sort of class-based families are. So one of the things that seems important to me to do with maps and geospatial thinking is to recognize that they're not facsimiles in most cases. They're interpretations of the world we live in. They're the things we find important. They're the ways we want to tell those stories to other people so that they can then acknowledge that or play by those rules or somehow contribute to it. So geospatial thinking to me is not a dot on a map, although certainly putting things by location is important. Seeing change over time and place is important. Seeing relationships between places are important. But it is more than a dot. Here's an example. You guys know where that is? Where do you think that place is? Underneath that yellow dot, where is that? You can even start by just looking at that. Where's that? Sarah, where? Close, but not. I'm sorry? It is DC. So that's Washington, D.C., says the person who's from D.C. So how did you know it was from D.C. without having been from D.C.? Are there things on there that you recognize?
Me?
Whoever said D.C., what do you see, AJ? So what do you see that you recognize that to be D.C.?
It's the mall, isn't
Okay, so you see the mall, and you see the, okay. All right, smarty cat AJ, where's that? Where's that then, since you live there?
Is that the
Nope, close. Nope, close.
Jefferson?
Nope, close. Keep going. Nope, close. That's the Washington Monument. Right? So there is a very specific, very concrete location, an absolute location of that place. Like we can put our finger on a map and say that's where the Washington Monument is. We can take a picture from above. We can walk and stand right there at those coordinates. We can use those phones that are giving us cancer in our pockets right now to mark that and say this is exactly where we are. So there is a location to geography. But that dot also has other qualities. And this is the story that I think is more important and more interesting. And this is where communities and neighborhoods and place really start to converge. That dot has characteristics like context. Why was it put there? Why was the Washington Monument constructed in this place, in this manner, with this neighborhood, with this urban planning? The dot becomes a place with connections with other places, allusions, similar constructions and intent. It becomes a place that has a history. There's a whole history of the construction of that spot, of that location. As many of you know, when you go to the Washington Monument, you can see it change color about a little over halfway up. Do you guys know where that is who don't live in DC? Do you know why? Please, give me the answer. I've been waiting for you to come up with an answer because I saw you, I've been seeing you churn.
Because during the Civil War,
Yep.
after the Civil War,
That's right.
the materials they used changed because of money.
That's exactly right, and they changed it to a different color marble. So you can go and actually see the line right where the Civil War started and ended. That's a great answer, thank you. A place like this has memories and experiences. People who go there and experience things and document them in a variety of ways. Places, a very particular location often changes because of physical events like the earthquake in 2011 with the epicenter in Louisa, Virginia, still created cracks. It's a place of celebration and commemoration. It's a place of national narrative and story. But it's also a place of individual story. And it's a place of destination and marginalization. So all of these layers are happening in this one single dot on a map. And that's the story that we're actually trying to capture. And that's where the tools that you've been shared with, in my view, can really kind of capture that story and bring that forward. It's telling the story of the place and its location and its relationship to other places. It's pinpointing exactly why that place matters and the alchemy that happens when certain events occur. It's a way to see its connection and its relationship to humans and community and conversation and successes and failures. It really does become more than a dot. And so when you think about working with maps and geography, it's not about maps in your textbook that you just kind of look at and find the answer. It's a place of interrogation and inquiry. It's a place where questions really drive that use. So here's my last point. how do you get those stories? So if you've got these big fabrics of communities, all these things happening over time and place, and you're trying to capture that to put into some kind of mapping visualization, what are good ways to do that? One way is we do it at the National Humanities Center is through a project we have called the Humanities Moments Project. So this project was started 3 years ago, and it was inspired by our current president, Robert Newman. When he gave his inauguration speech, he used this phrase, and I think he did it sort of offhandedly, humanities moment, lowercase h, lowercase m. And he described 3 times in his life in which something in the humanities helped him clarify his purpose and bring value to his identity and help him sort of get something. It was a bam. It was a moment where he really sort of understood something. And so he decided to ask other people if they've had similar moments. And of course, most, if not everybody has. As you move through your life, regardless of your age, you can look back and say, you know what, that book gave me a vocabulary for an experience I never would have had otherwise. Or that painting, or that piece of music, or that Metallica song, or, I see you with your shirt on, or these things that sort of inform who you are, and they give you just a special lens. And we ask people to give those to us into a crowdsourced archive. So you can go to the site, humanities.moments.org, and you can see individual moments from a variety of people, both well-known and famous and celebrity, as well as just everyday people who are thinking this. All of the moments are geotagged, so we can see where they occurred. But even that's not accurate, because that's interpretation. You put the geotag where you had the moment, or where the moment you had the moment about occurred. And there's an interpretation, right? It's all sort of you telling a story. But we put it into a map, we start to see connections, we keyword it so that we can see the trends and the connections. We have audio, video, and text-based moments, and then we can start making collections. And it's really pretty powerful to see that a certain place, like the Washington Monument, or the Incline View in Pittsburgh, or a particular piece of art or literature has encouraged this kind of moment. For those who struggle to put words on this, and I find that particularly really younger people do because they haven't had enough life experience to really be reflective like this, I think it's also helpful to give them moments as third-person examples. Here's what someone else thought and felt when they heard this speech, or they read this passage, or they did this piece of poetry. And so I do think it's got value instructionally in both a production way, and it's also a review way. So we invite you, and we're going to be working, I think, in the community of Pittsburgh to harvest people's moments as a way to show commonality in communities, a way of showing connections of what people have gone through, particularly if this is their home place. And we do want to put those into a map to visualize that and start to show the connections and the impact of these moments on the broader community. I'm going to leave you with just a couple of resources, particularly if you're an educator, that we do have in terms of geospatial thinking and geography. That includes a whole variety of online resources, free and open, that have both media and curricular basis. We do offer online courses in ArcGIS and StoryMap. These are 5-week courses in which you can actually learn the nitty-gritty of the buttonology of StoryMap, but doing so in the narratives of the humanities. And this coming week, actually, it's likely far too soon and far too far away for folks in this room, but we do on-site trainings in GIS as well, and we'll be doing one this coming week with scholars and teachers in North Carolina. So all that's to say that geography, in my view, is a super important vocabulary of the humanities, and if you're interested, I'd be love to follow up with you when the time comes. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think we feel very lucky to have a connection to the National Humanities Center and to be able to keep learning from this. So now we're going to hear a few words from Sunana Chand about Remake Learning, and then we'll be able to take a break and then go to the fair. So
Cool.
come on up. So for those of you, I'm assuming many of you may know Sunana, who's the director of Remake Learning, who also has a background in teaching and education.
We're entangled on everything.
Connection to her. Okay, go ahead.
Cool. Thank you. What time, Lisa?
So maybe like 5 minutes or so?
Oh, that is
Because
perfect.
I'd love to have some questions, time for questions as well. Shannon, did you have one?
Mine's really is the economic perspective. That's the one.
That's at 1 p.m.
Okay.
Yep, and that's going to be across the hall in the other. Yes. Great, okay.
5 minutes. Y'all, I know so many of you already. That I was like, I looked at the attendee list for today before I got here, and I was like, I am not going to do the like, what is remake learning? Most of you, if not all of you, know what remake learning is. So instead, I dropped the slides and I thought, for 5 minutes, let me think about how I think of remake learning as a map, because you've been thinking a lot about maps today, and how, you know, we at the Remake Learning Court Infrastructure team like really think about a network as a map of social relationships, and then also what's missing from the Remake Learning Network and what's missing and who's missing from that map, both historically and currently. And so I'm actually gonna, thank you, Dan. Where did Dan go? For helping set this up, because I did not have any slides, and so they were really kind to kind of throw on this whole contraption, let me borrow a computer, so appreciate that. So what I want to do actually is I'm going to start by showing you some maps that you might not know that we have. One that I often show people, which is at remakelearning.org/maker, is a maker map. And it's way at the bottom of the website, so I feel like people don't always know that it's here. But this is a map of a bunch of Pittsburgh makerspaces that we've compiled over time. Makerspaces at museums, libraries, out-of-school programs. We know from the network that there are over 200 educational makerspaces in the Pittsburgh region. And if you zoom out, you can really see where a lot of those are in Pittsburgh. And you can see here that we categorize them by higher ed, museum, intermediate unit, PD space. And when you click on one of these, you can see exactly where it is. Depending on the information, you can also see contact information. Depending on the point, you can also see the type of tools and materials that are available in this space. It's a really local resource. This map makes me think of two things. One, it makes me think of the fact that it's not updated as much as we'd like it to be, right? I think part of the challenge with mapping is that it takes a lot to update it. It takes new information and new sources of data, and it takes human capital to really dig into, you know, being able to update it and make it frequent. So we know, for instance, that there are new makerspaces that have popped up in the Hill District that are not located on this map. And that's something that we have to continuously work on, trying to figure out how to update. And I know also that there are a lot of makerspaces on this map that are no longer there or no longer active. And so how do we continue to make that relevant? Another thing that I know about this map is that not as many people access it as we'd like. So we have data on how many people access it. And so we're always thinking about, you know, we're collecting all this information from a whole community perspective and trying to figure out how to communicate that map in a way that makes sense for educators, in a way that folks can actually use, is something that we always have a struggle with. Sometimes we're more successful than others. I think about another map when I think about mapping and remake learning. I think about a map that La Trenda helped create for computer science. And, you know, maps come in all kinds of different forms. So that was more of a geographic map that we're used to. La Trenda helped create a map of computer science programs in the region, which we categorized into this publication called the Quick Start Guide. If you scroll through this guide, you'll see a bunch of kind of one-page case studies about different ways in which computational thinking has been, has kind of popped up in the Remake Learning Network at museums, at schools, at libraries. You'll be able to see the cost, the time, the people, kind of the step-by-step instruction. And what I love about this is it's a different kind of map. There are about 25 case studies here. It's not a geographic map, but it's certainly a map of different types of resources and stories in the Remake Learning Network over time. And you know, what I love about this too is it's also kind of a map of people. You can actually connect to the person in Pittsburgh who's doing this work and get advice on how to do it yourself. And so another thing that I personally love about Remake Learning and about doing this work is that something a network can do is say, what are all different types of organizations doing across Pittsburgh? And how do we bring that together and showcase and celebrate and be of service to all of the amazing educators who are doing work in this region? And so a different kind of map. And also with a lot of the same challenges as the other map I just showed you, the makerspace map, right? How does this get updated? How do we make sure that the content continues to be refreshed and relevant? How do we make sure that the contact information for the people here continues to be refreshed and relevant? That's something that La Trenda is thinking about right now, because this came out a year ago and already there are things that we need to update, right? So another way that maps can be useful is that in Pittsburgh they can connect people who otherwise weren't connected. So another map that you might not know about that's on our rural page, so this is a space entirely devoted to the rural parts of the network outside of Allegheny County. that my colleague Allie manages. And Allie has a map down here of all of the rural parts of the network. So everyone that she's contacted in the Pittsburgh region that is kind of part of the Remake Learning Network that she's been able to get in contact with is on this map. And you can kind of see, it's not all rural, but it's mostly folks who are outside of Allegheny County in some of these rural areas. And what's awesome about this map is, it's not just schools, museums, libraries, but it's also food banks and community centers and places that are kind of outside of the traditional quote-unquote learning space that she's been able to really bring into the network in beautiful ways. And similarly, if you click on any of these, you can see a little bit more information about them, and obviously contacting Allie will help make connections to any of these places. So again, how do we figure out, both, once you get it on a map, how do we figure out how to get it to more network members and make sure more of those connections are being made and make sure it's continuously updated is a challenge that we often have. One other type of map I want to show you two more maps I want to show you before we go from the Remake Learning standpoint. Raise your hand if you are a member of the Remake Learning Network, like on the directory. I know, yeah, cool. So a few of us are in the room. So what I love about this particular map is that if you're a teacher in a classroom who's doing a PBL workshop or who's doing content on a specific thing, and you want to know who are the other people, I really want an industry partner to help with this. You can actually look at the member category, select private company, and suddenly you have a filter of a bunch of people who are working at companies if you wanted to connect to an industry partner, right? Who are at least on the website as part of the network. Let's say you wanted to find somebody who had a specific interest area in youth voice, let's just say. You can connect to people who have selected that as their interest area too. And there are phone numbers and email addresses, and it's not perhaps a social network analysis kind of like what Andy was showing earlier in terms of bubbles and how people are connected. But at least it's a slight map of the community and kind of what people are interested in. Of course, it's not an entire map of the community. And there are a lot of people that are missing from this directory that are just not included in this ability to search and find people on the website. So when we think about the Remake Learning Network and really deepening and making those connections more inclusive and more intentional, a lot of what we think about on an infrastructure team is moving from saying this is an open network to saying, like, how do we be intentional about bringing people into the network who have been historically and currently marginalized and oppressed? How can we be more supportive and more inclusive and more in service of educators in the network who don't appear in this directory for various reasons? And so while this is an incredible resource and an incredible map, we're constantly thinking about what is missing from all of these maps that we have and how do we create more intentionally inclusive maps of our community. And so, I don't have an answer for that right now, and I throw it out to you as people who have been parts of the network for a really long time to also help us think about, all of these maps and all this information we're collecting on the entire learning ecosystem and learning community and how we can do that better. So part of this is like me telling you what's going on, but I'm sure you already know a lot of this, and most of it is actually just saying, can you actually help us think about this? Because you are part of this community as well. The last map that I thought about when I was preparing for this was a map of stories. So another kind of map that we have is the blog. And this blog has been kind of in creation since, I don't know, Greg's here, 2011 or something. We've been having stories for a really long time. And I thought a lot about, like, how are stories maps? And how can we look through the entire kind of, history of the stories that we've told and see how language has changed, see how thoughts have changed, see how topics have changed as a way to map the history of the network and to map the history of what our network members have been doing and to map the history of who network members are. And so, my colleague Ani talks a lot about how she really wants a Remake Learning librarian or a Remake Learning archivist to be able to go back into all of this historical data and information from the last, 12 years that Remake Learning has been around, and to really take a look at both how, the stories have changed and how things have been different, but also kind of how how we talk about things differently, and how that's also kind of a map. And, again, I don't think this is, I only have 5 minutes, so I know it's not the time right now to kind of ask for your input, but I would hope that folks in the room would think about that and give us your input. Like, what are the things that you still don't see in our storytelling? What are the things that we need to have more of a perspective on as we map stories, as we map places, as we map the people in this region who are doing amazing learning work? And so I would invite that for you to come up to me after this talk, and we can talk a little bit more about it. But when I was thinking about maps and preparing for this, I was like, wow, we really have a lot of stories that we have record of, but maybe not exactly a map of, and how do we think more intentionally about that? And so the website is full of maps, is full of information, is full of data points, and we're constantly figuring out, from a network perspective, as folks who don't do any youth work, but who are working and supporting so many educators who are doing beautiful, incredible work like all of you in the region. How do we do that better? How do we continue to map better? How can we really pull that out as something that the network is both able to do and also could do a little bit better as we move forward. So mostly because you all are kind of advanced remake learners and know a lot about what the network already is, I just kind of wanted to come up here and say, these materials are on the website if you don't already know about them, and these materials also need a lot of work to be more intentionally inclusive, to be more intentionally broad and diverse and helpful to people, and so also seeking for all of your help in that process. So I think that's it. I'd be really interested to hear, A, if you have any questions about any of this, but B, if you could come to me and tell me what this brings up for you or how we can do any of these things better. I'd appreciate it. But I've been really thinking a lot since Lisa asked me to do this about what maps we produce, what is the capacity of a network to produce maps, and how we can continue to do that better. So that's all I wanted to say. I hope you enjoy the fair. I hope you enjoy the day. It seems like it's been a really beautiful one, so thank you for having me.
Let the moment pass. If there is a burning question that you might have, please feel free to ask it, and we'll be here for the next 15 minutes, and then we'll be moving into the other spaces. Sorry, anybody has that big question on their mind right now for Samantha, for Andy? Yeah.
I just would like to know, because how is this stuff funded, and how are people getting paid in this, and so how did you come here today? Where did money come from?
So it's funded, and we'll have a slide up on the moment, by the Grable Foundation and Foundation, and the New America is funded by about several dozen funders as well. And we're all, working together to try to make sure we're...
So how much do you get paid to speak like that?
Oh, there's not a payment for that.
The speakers are getting paid?
Tips.
So no money is exchanging hands?
We can talk after. I'm happy to provide those materials. But yeah, very transparent about that.
I'd like to see, because that's the one thing I'm struggling with is I'm looking more education thing outside of the school, is I just would like to see more transparency in the funding and the relationships, and that would be a really interesting app, and I know you have some of it, I don't know, because this is a new organization.
Right, and there's,
I just would like to see it really clear,
that.
this is what a speaker gets paid.
Right.
This is what I'd like to see. Thank you.
There's great mapping that the Allegheny Partnership for Out of School Time has done about out of school organizations. Mapping government contracts, mapping philanthropic support, mapping corporate support. That's all available online about how, I thought I heard you say the out of school time space.
Well, no, neither or, either just in general, because I just would like to see the transparency as a priority. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh no, don't apologize. All of our funders are on the website too, speaking of mapping.
Yes, you know what I'm saying? Like,
that makes sense.
Is this selling or is this teaching? Is what my question was. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of selling.
We'll move into the next couple of hours. I think that these are great things to kind of put down on our comment boards and places to kind of reflect on and provide that feedback, and we can keep adding that into the conversation as well. Because I do think that some of it is about helping people find each other and connect, and the more that we can make apparent where we're connected and where we're not and what we need to do, that's the main role.
Right. It's also something, though, it was put out as a community, and this time, a lot of the speakers did stay the whole time, but some didn't. So when you're talking about building a community, and people just seem to be coming just to speak and not to be part of a community. Isn't
Yeah,
that a
well, that's
bad
good
idea?
feedback for us, actually. I appreciate that. And we do have the next couple of hours to be able to pull more of that and to have movements for the community community members to provide ideas. So we very much welcome that. So I'm going to say a big thank you again to everyone who's been here for lunch. And just want to join me in a round of applause for everyone who's been here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Shamir had a question too.
Oh, I'm sorry, Shamir. I didn't see.
Are you guys going to ever put the website in multi-language?
That's a really good thought. The Remake Learning Days website was in about 7 languages this year, and we haven't done that for the Remake Learning website. I'm actually going to put that in a note right now for our team meeting on Monday, and we'll talk about it. Thank you, Shamina.
Sorry, any other questions?
Cool.
Thank you. For your time, everybody, and we'll go back here in a couple hours. So.
Yeah.